fourth gospel, according to Mark, a story many of us will know. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." That's the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And then from the book of Proverbs in the 22nd chapter, train children in the right way, and when old, they will not stray. This verse is about clear and simple wisdom. The kind of wisdom we try to give to our children, all people try to give their children. Whether it's our own children, our grandchildren, a niece, a nephew, the little boy or girl that lives next door. And so often it's quite simple. We buckle our children in with their car seats, and when they become teenagers and are headed out, we say, "Wear your seatbelt, slow down, and be in touch." Right? We give them that wisdom to take with them. We tell them, "Look both ways before you cross the street." As they get to middle school, we tell them, when someone offers you a vape, just say, "No thanks, I'm good," and that's enough. We try to give our children the kind of wisdom that allows them to move through the world. And the book of Proverbs is filled, literally filled, with such wisdom. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Got a few more for you. One who forgives an affront fosters friendship, but one who dwells on disputes will alienate a friend. Just one more. The human mind may devise many plans, but it is the purposes of the Lord that will be established. There's something interesting about wisdom. It's something we grow in. Do you know that when Jesus was a boy, he grew in stature? That just means he got taller, and he grew in wisdom. When Jesus was about 12 or 13 years old, he was with his family in Jerusalem, and they went back home in a big caravan. Jesus stayed, and his family didn't know where he was. They finally found him. That's another story for another sermon. But after that, the Bible tells us that Jesus grew in stature and in wisdom as he increased in years. It's interesting to think about Jesus increasing in his wisdom, because the Bible speaks about Jesus Christ as being the wisdom of God. But that shows us something very, very important about being a human being and about trying to raise children. At about age 12 or 13, we start to recognize that the world is not always so simple. It can be complicated and complex. At about 12 or 13, we begin to realize that we can't simply apply one piece of wisdom in every situation, but we need to begin to discern what true wisdom is. This is why it is so important for us as a church to remain in the lives of children after confirmation as they grow into middle school and grow into high school and grow into college, because that is the time when they are beginning to engage the complexity of wisdom in the world. What do I mean by that? Well, Proverbs gives an excellent example of this too. This comes from the 26th chapter. 2 verses. "Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself. Answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes. And it's telling that the book of Proverbs puts those two sayings right together, side by side. Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you'll end up a fool. But then also it says, do answer fools according to their folly, or they'll remain a fool. Now, this at first seems to be a contradiction. It is a contradiction at the simplest level, but we're looking at the complexity of wisdom. Adult wisdom means knowing when it is best to apply in which way. It's knowing that when you hear someone say something foolish, sometimes it's best to keep quiet. And sometimes it is important to say something. And wisdom is being able to tell the difference between the two. Now, this idea of knowing one time from another is in many places in the Bible. The most famous has to be from the book of Ecclesiastes. There's a time to plant and a time to pluck up. There's a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. Both of those are true, and wisdom is the capacity to tell one from the other. In the book of Jonah, the town of Nineveh is described as being morally lost. And the phrase used to describe that is to say they could not tell their right hand from their left hand. They couldn't distinguish one thing from another. They lacked wisdom. For our children, we do not want them only to know right and wrong. Of course, we want them to know that. But we want them to know how to navigate through the challenging choices with wisdom. We see this in our culture too, ordinary human culture. Think about these two ideas. Quit while you're ahead. Winners never quit, and quitters never win. Now the truth is both of those things are true, and the challenge is knowing when to apply it. There's a great American philosopher, a sage, who puts this pretty well. You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Know when to walk away and know when. Right. Now that's fun, silly, playful, and completely true. Mature wisdom is knowing which to do when. So the question becomes, how do we have wisdom? How do we give wisdom to people in our life? How do we gain wisdom? The Apostle Paul gives us an important clue in the beginning of his letter to the church in Corinth. He says this, and in Paul's way, this is a passing idea in a very long string of ideas, but he says this: Christ crucified is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Christ crucified is the power of God, and he is the wisdom of God. The book of James is a kind of New Testament wisdom book, and it doesn't talk about Jesus a lot, but it constantly is talking about how to live properly because we know we get that wisdom from Jesus when we ask him. For Jesus has wisdom, and Jesus is wisdom, and Jesus gives us wisdom. Let's take a look at what I mean about Jesus having wisdom. Let's go back to our boat, back to the disciples. They had been terrified in a storm. They asked Jesus, "Don't you care that we're about to die?" And he stands up and he says to the storm, "Hush, sit down." I'm paraphrasing. But can you imagine being in a boat where the boat is rocking and water's pouring in the side, and then suddenly the wind stops? I can imagine them swaying as their sea legs are still trying to get themselves under them while it's so still. I can imagine the surface of the water that was chopped up, gray and white and rough, is now still, flat like a mirror. reflecting the sky overhead. And that's when Jesus looks at them and says, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" This always seemed harsh to me, this reply of Jesus, until this week our Bible study looked at this story and then looked at the rest of chapter 5. Because Jesus, in this long passage, distinguishes when to speak a sharp word and a soft word, when to speak no word, and when to share what God has done. Let me take you a little bit through the rest of the story. In the next story, Jesus they're going to the far side of the Sea of Galilee. And the thing to know is that's not a place where there were a lot of Jewish people. Jesus is leaving his home territory, so to speak. And when he gets there, he meets a man who is consumed by evil. Now, it's impossible to explain exactly what it means that this man is filled by demons, but he is consumed by this destructive power of evil. He lives in the graveyard. The people in town have tried to bind him, but he smashes the chains and harms himself. He comes up to Jesus, and this power of evil is speaking to him. Jesus asks the name, and it doesn't give a name, it says Legion. Legion was a Roman military unit between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers. That's why I say this man is consumed by the power of evil. Jesus drives this evil force out of the man. They go into a herd of pigs, about 2,000 pigs. That's a lot of pigs. And they run off the cliff into the Sea of Galilee and are destroyed. The pig herders, the swine herders go into town and tell everybody. And the people are terrified. They're frightened. And they come out and they see this man, and he's clothed, and he's calm, and he's in his right mind. They have seen the power of God at work. And they're terrified. And they say to Jesus, "Please leave." And he does. Jesus knows that he wants the power of God to be present in their lives, but when they ask him to leave, he has the wisdom to know they will not be able to accept what he has. But as he's leaving, the man who he saved runs up to him and begs him, "Please let me come with you," which I think is a very natural response. This man wants to be with the one who saved him, and Jesus says, "No. I want you to go back out, go back home, and tell everyone what God has done for you." Interestingly enough, this appears to be the first mission of Jesus outside of the Jewish people, to Gentiles, to most of us. At any rate, we can only assume Mark doesn't follow up, but I certainly like to believe that the man listens to Jesus. How could he not go and share this wonderful news? Does he have family to show up back well and in his right mind? Jesus sends him away. We'll go on a little more. Jesus crosses back to home country. And he's there, and a man comes up, a man named Jairus. It's interesting we know his name. Jairus was a very important man in the synagogue. Now, don't think of him like the staff, like a pastor. Think of him more like the elders or your adult Sunday school teacher, a Christian here that you respect and you trust their wisdom. Now imagine that person like Jairus running up to Jesus, throwing themselves on the ground, their face in the dust. Jairus' face is in the dust, and he says to Jesus, "Please with Jesus, please come to my house. My little girl is sick. She is dying. Please come and heal her." Jesus hears this request. He doesn't say anything. He just gets up and walks with the man. Now, it's a good long walk. And of course, the crowd is going with them. And as they're walking along, there's a woman. And this woman has had a health problem for 12 years. The Bible calls it an issue of blood. She has a gynecological problem. And for 12 years, she has gone to doctors, but she hasn't gotten any better. In fact, she has gotten worse, and she has spent all the money she has. And what the readers of that day would know is not only is she suffering physically, but she's suffering socially. She would have had to be isolated because of her condition, unable to be with her family in a close and friendly way, kept at a distance. Well, this woman has the idea, if I can just get up and touch the edge of Jesus' robe, I'll be healed. Now, this is a bold and audacious thing to do. In that society, women didn't go up and touch men they didn't know or weren't related to, or vice versa. It just wasn't proper conduct. And her condition made it even more improper for her to do so, but she does it. She slips through this busy, jostling crowd, packed together, I like to think 1,000 people. And she gets up close to Jesus, and she touches the edge of his robe, and he stops. He can feel that something happened. Power has gone out of him. And he says, who touched me? Now, this is where the story gets a little bit funny. The disciples say, Lord, there's about 1,000 people packed in on you. What do you mean, who touched you? I mean, James right now is touching you, and Eddie and Frank and whatever. What do you mean? But Jesus knows something has happened. He knows someone's life has been transformed. And he waits. And the woman comes forward. She could have slunk off and been well. But she comes forward and she tells the whole truth. What an incredible phrase, right? She tells the whole truth. And Jesus could have scolded her. He could have said, you shouldn't have done that. What are you doing, touching me, sneaking up on me, stealing my power? That's not at all what he does. This is what he says. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Of course, this is just the middle part of this story. You'll remember Jairus. They were on the way to Jairus' house to save his poor, dying daughter. And right after he finishes speaking, Jesus finishes speaking to this woman, servants from Jairus' house come up and say, you don't need to trouble the teacher anymore. Your daughter has died. But that doesn't stop Jesus. He knows the power of God. He can sense that God is at work against even the power of death, and he continues to go on. Now, the custom in that day was to have people outside wailing and mourning in a public show of grief. That's just how they did things. But Jesus walks up and says, why are you wailing and moaning? The girl isn't dead, she's asleep. Now, I tend to think he's using the metaphor there, but at any rate, the mourners laugh at him. They mock him. They know what a dead person is. And then Jesus says to the Father and a few disciples, come inside, everybody else go away. And they enter the house. I think we should imagine how still that room must be. I know many of us have probably been in the room with someone who has died. And you only know how much a person moves, even when they're ill, until you're with someone who has passed away. As a young pastor, I got a call in the middle of the night at the parsonage, the manse where we lived, and a member of the church, I hadn't even met him. I'd only been there a few months. He had died, and the hospital had the parsonage number on file, so they called me over about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was so struck when I walked in the room at how quiet and still the room was. Now, it wasn't just that they had turned off the monitors, though that was part of it. But this man, this brother in Christ who had gone to the Lord, his body was far more still than I knew a body could be. And that's how we should imagine it when Jesus goes into the house. This girl, her corpse, perfectly still. And yet he takes her hand in his own hands and he speaks to her. He says, little girl, get up. And she does. He raises her from the dead. And then Jesus does two things. He tells them, gives them two commands. The first is puzzling. He says, don't tell anyone what happened in here. Now, what I think is happening there is Jesus doesn't want people to think he's a mere charlatan, a wonder worker. There were a lot of hucksters in that day. But I think we both know that there's no way that this story isn't getting out. When that little girl walks outside and everybody outside sees her, that story is going on and on. But he does something else. He looks at her parents and says, give her something to eat. If nothing else, I love the tenderness and the humanity of that moment. That Jesus sees it all the way through that she might be restored. So we have all of these stories together in which Jesus behaves in very different ways. And each of those differences shows Jesus' wisdom. When the disciples come to Jesus and say, don't you care that we're dying? What they're inviting him to do is come and be helpless with us. And Jesus is not there to help us be helpless. It's a self-centered question, I think, understandably. These are professional fishermen. They know when danger is on the sea. But it's not a request for help. It's not even a lamentation. Don't you care about us? And Jesus rebukes them. And then on the other hand, when the woman comes and understandably sneaks up to seek healing from him, he draws out the encounter. He wants to have the conversation with her. He can sense she's been transformed, and that must be some sign of faith, and he wants to send her away, not just healed, but encouraged. He wants to encourage her in the trust and the faith that brought her to him in the first place. He discerns how to respond to one group and to the lady. Or look at what he says to the man, the Gerasene man. He wants to come with Jesus, but he says, no. Go and tell everybody what God has done for you. I think in a sense, Jesus is preparing the work of the church decades down the road so that the news of what God has done will be out in the world. But at the very least, Jesus wants outsiders to share in the joy of what God has done for people. And then on the other hand, at Jairus' house, he strictly orders them not to tell anyone. He discerns that spreading this story will interfere with his mission of people coming to know the joy and peace and hope that he is bringing in God. Jesus had the wisdom to discern one thing from another, to move through the incredible complexity of life in a way that carried him forward to God's purpose. As it happens, that purpose is the cross that saves you and me. So, let me finish with the question. I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it. Do you see a lot of wisdom in our society, in our world today? Now, we have lots of smarts. I mean, we understand germs, and we make machines fly and do all kinds of incredible things. And I think we see a lot of cunning, maybe some shrewdness. But my question is, do you feel like we are acting as a society with a huge amount of wisdom? Or flip the question. Does there seem to be a lot of foolishness? I think there is. Would you like more wisdom? I know I would. Think about a situation maybe in your life. Question that you have. Maybe for you or someone you care about. And what we need to do when we need wisdom, when we recognize we need wisdom, is to ask the one who gives it to us, to ask Jesus. And that does two things. The first is it'll cause you to pause. And it may be that God has already given you the wisdom you need to discern. You simply need a beat, a breath, to apply that wisdom. But oftentimes, sometimes, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to navigate. And we need someone to give us that wisdom. This is the good news. Christ crucified is the power of God and the wisdom of God. He is God's wisdom. He has God's wisdom. And he gives it to you. All we need to do is move forward, like the woman of long ago. Reach out our hand and let him give it to us. All glory be to God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.